Good evening, everyone, and welcome to DIA. My name is Matilde Guidaglia. I'm a curator here and the organizer of the Artist and Artist Lecture Series, where since 2001 we invite an artist to reflect upon the work of another artist in DIA's collection and past program. And I am very pleased to introduce tonight's event featuring Tiona Nekkia McClodden on Melvin Edwards. Before diving in, I wish to thank Max Tannon, Kim Golding, Jordan Carter, Ella Denelson, the visitor service team at DIA, the Skowhegan Archives and Library, and Melvin Edwards, who allowed us to play excerpts from a lecture he gave at Skowhegan in 1981. And most especially, I wish to thank Tiona for the generosity that she has put in preparing this talk that we'll hear in a moment. When we invite an artist to give a lecture here in the series, we do not prescribe or assign an artist they should talk about. However, we did expect, to be honest, that Tiona would choose Melvin. Since 2022, at DIA Beacon, we have pictures here. We have had the pleasure to present a group of barbed wire sculptures that Melvin originally designed and conceived in 1970-71. Some of them went on view, and he realized at the time, went on view at the Whitney in 1971. And many just remained ideas on paper. And when we invited Melvin to think of a show for Beacon, he decided to re-adapt and rethink those works for the Beacon galleries. And I still recall at one of the spring luncheons, Tiona's face exiting Melvin's gallery. She was smiling and very happy, and she said, "Melvin is one of my favorite artists." And so, yeah, fast forward to earlier this year when we invited Tiona to be part of the lecture. We did expect she would choose Melvin. What we did not expect was the level of personal material she would bring with her, and she will present tonight. I should say, yesterday as we were rehearsing here, the word para-mentorship came up in terms of like the role that Melvin has had in Tiona's life and career and work. And I was thinking today how this is very much what Tiona will do tonight, to kind of share so much of her relationship, but also a new aspect also of Melvin's own work is so similar to what you do, Tiona, in your work at large. Comes to mind your, it came up also in conversation yesterday, the work that Tiona, some of you might have seen it, is now part of the MoMA permanent collection. It was on view a couple of years ago, a portrait of Brad Johnson that Tiona realized through a group of objects, recreating a group of the poet's objects, and then a video where she's upside down and reading his poem on subjugation as this kind of emotional and physical endurance performance, which, however, is also equally ecstatic at the moment when she finishes. And it won't be as strenuous tonight, but definitely Tiona will definitely give a lot of personal material. And so please join me welcoming Tiona Nekkia McClodden and Melvin Edwards.
Do you have note-taking material? If you do, you should take it out. And I say that because I'm going to take notes in real time as well, and I'll talk a little bit about why. Thank you, Matilde, for this lovely introduction. And thank you to the DIA team for always being so deeply professional and precise in a way that is like allows me to do things like this. I want to acknowledge this has been a rough year. I just opened my 9th show last week. And, when this this invite came, I was already a little spent, but I felt like this was a gift from the gods. for me to be able to sit here before you all and talk about Melvin Edwards. And I hope that you can have the space to walk with me on this very vulnerable journey of sharing that I'm about to do, because I'm going to share some things I've never shared. All right. So I'm going to dedicate this presentation to two individuals. One is Koyo Kuyo for her generosity and ear. The second is to Okikilo, my Oriate, who's been a crucial part of my spiritual life for 11 years before he passed away. So tonight, some of you may know my work, and I think that most of you know me as Tiona Nekkia McClodden. I also have another name. That name is Afefe Ogun, which means the winds of Ogun. I'm a child of Ogun. Ogun is an Orisha that's rooted in the Yoruba culture, and I'm just going to give you a basic primer of some things that are iconographic in relationship to the god. So when I say also, when I have a god, I have the crown, so I'm his child, I'm not the god. Let's be clear. The Orisha are considered flesh and like gods of the flesh, I guess you could say. My journey started as young as a child. I grew up in Greenville, South Carolina, and was a child of a military family. And most of my access to art, as I know it, was through the library. One of the first books that I got access to, I have on the table here. Black Images, The Art of West Africa. People in the South will tell you, you're about as good as your librarian. I didn't have too many good librarians in South Carolina, but they had an affinity for African art, apparently. So even as a young child, my first understanding of art, which was a blessing, was pretty much African art and then Jacob Lawrence. That was it. And that still persists to this day. So with Ogun, Ogun has colors. They change and range across the diaspora. I was initiated in Cuba, Havana, Cuba to be exact, in 2012. Ogun's colors are read as green and black. The Ogun that I have has a dash of red for blood. The Ogun I have is Ogun Chibariki, just the fiercest Ogun. Ogun is known to have 7 tools that are given to you when you receive him. When you receive your pot, you receive 21 tools. My Ogun is so big that I have to have 42 tools in my altar. So I'm going to start this talk off because part of it is contextualizing and coming and doing, or the challenge that I gave myself is to think about how to approach this lecture through the lens of a child of Ogun, not just as this artist that exists in the art world in this kind of weird form. So what I want to do also is bring a couple of other artists in the room before I get into Melvin and my work, just to kind of loosen up the fact that this is not something that is new. There are many artists who have engaged with Ogun aesthetically, spiritually, in a range of different forms, and I'm just going to talk about a couple that I admire and have followed over the years. Pierre Verger is one of the first for me. I've read a lot of his work. It falls under the lens or the category of ethnographic work. I like Pierre Verger because he's actually an initiate. So a lot of people who did ethnographic work, they maintain a particular kind of distance, whereas Pierre joined the actual faith and the practice. Caribe, Hector Julio Paride Bernabeu, artist based out of Bahia, Salvador Bahia. He has this amazing set of panels, drawings, paintings, of works. I was spent 1 month in Bahia, Salvador Bahia in 2013, which was the month before I exited my year in all white. And one of the first presentations of Ogun as like a really deep sculpture that mixed wood and metal was through his room, his Orisha panels in the Pierre Verger Museum, or Museo Afro-Brasileiro at the Universidad. We have Wilfredo Lam, and his, one of many portraits of Ogun. Jack Whitten, Ogun's Shield, 1989. Kerry James Marshall, Ogun 3, 1983-89. It's a woodcut print. I got the chance to see that in London just recently. But it's tons and tons of paintings where you'll find Ogun and his work. It's very beautiful. Matthew Barney, Dalama Lamina Osete de Ogun, part of a larger, gorgeous work that is, where the largest part is in the Imahutim Museum or Institute. So now, the way that I'm going to start this talk off is kind of in relationship to what I've set up here. 2018, I got completely burnt out, which is probably what many of us are feeling in this room right now, which is totally fine. 2018 is also about 7 years ago. 7 years ago, I was 5 years old in my practice, so we go by year. So I'm initiated in 2012. I come out in 2013. That's when my age or my life starts in a certain way. So 5 years old, I go to Skowhegan, I apply. I don't really know what Skowhegan is. I didn't know how coveted it was. And I went there thinking that it was gonna offer me a space to recover and kind of gather my mind back together after a pretty grueling year. 2018, if any of you remember, this is the same year that I do the Julius Eastman retrospective, The Kitchen. After that, I do a presentation where I build a juke joint at recess for my grandfather. After that, I do a solo presentation called Club, where I turn Performance Space New York into a club based off of the SM and disco clubs that were in the Lower East Side, and run it like a club owner and issue club cards, many that people still show me to this day. So I was beat. I go to Skowhegan. I'm trying to kind of piece things together. And what I always talk about, and I wanted to show here, as you can see, there's a table and there's brown paper on it. It's kind of a ritual practice that I do. I still do it. It's in my studio back home. Whenever I turn something over, I set the table. That's kind of how I know that things are gonna happen. What I also do is I use the paper as a note-taking practice. And it builds up junk. I already spilled water on this one, so it's already really live. But I place different things, books, there's all kinds of notes. Never really Post-it notes. Pictures, and then I use it as a place where I actually work. One of the things that was happening to me when I went to Skowhegan, because of how grueling that year was, is that I was pretty much in a nonverbal state. For that first week, I pretty much slept the entire week, and was deeply overwhelmed by a very young artist, because I was one of the oldest artists there. I think I was 37 at the time. Somebody was 19, and they asked me who Prince was. And I almost lost my mind. And my time there was extraordinarily difficult, but I am interested in working through that time because I think it was so generative for me, and the conflict and the difficulty of it was, and the isolation. One of the things that was difficult because of my age, I didn't have too many people to talk in depth about the things that really concerned me. So one of the things that I did is that I sought out the library. I spent a lot of time in the library. It was like the library in my studio. And then I also accessed the Skowhegan archives. And at that time, I think it may have changed, because this is 2018, I don't know how it is now. You had to go and get an iPod, archaic device. Very old one, too. The one that you go like this and spin. And you could get access to all these lectures. You have to check it out. You go to your, place and you have to turn it back in or check it out again. And so I checked out the ones for two artists specifically, Melvin Edwards and Elizabeth Catlett. And Elizabeth Catlett's lecture was just as dynamic and profound for me, but our practices are extraordinarily different. And I felt like she played it felt like a motherly role, like a mother in the studio, very soft, very kind, very gentle, and very encouraging about travel. Melvin's lecture became a bit of an obsession for me. I listened to it every week, repetitively in the studio, and I'm going to basically share some of the more profound clips tonight. I know many people haven't heard this lecture. It's also the first time I heard his voice.
What I'll do basically is show you my work from my very sophisticated beginnings to my very awkward condition at the moment, and hope that you can empathize with some of the things that I've been trying to do. Basically, I grew up in Texas, in Houston. That's where I'm from. And I went to school in California. I'm going to try and do this quasi-biographically because while there's a general art world out there, the work is personal no matter what. And so in a certain sense, biography is important to me, not just for sake of chronology, but because I keep trying to feed on what I thought before and what I seem to have changed to think or developed to think at this point, both in the work and even if it doesn't show in the work, that it's a part of what I do. This slide is taken in Ile-Ife in Nigeria. Ile-Ife or Ife, Ile just means home or house, is the original place of the Yoruba peoples in West Africa, in Nigeria. They're actually in more places than that. But this was, in a sense, for me, a pilgrimage, if you like, in certain terms, a kind of return to roots, or at least to a place, because this is a staff of Oranmiyan, who was one of the founders of the Yoruba peoples, and it's in Ile-Ife, and it is sculpture, and it dates from about 800 AD, and that's approximate. And goats do mean something. Next slide. This is a blacksmith, or Otumfuo in Ghana, and again on my first trip home to West Africa, I got to meet a blacksmith. This is in a village called Lasebu, and as I go through the slides, you'll see the significance of these things to me, or at least some idea of it. Because one of my great-great-grandfathers was a young adult blacksmith trained in the old country and was sold in New York City to a family in Alabama, and that's my mother's family.
Okay, this is the point where you take notes. What I basically did, first of all, how lovely is this man's voice? One of the things I would do is sit, I'd listen, and I would take the things out. Take out the things that made sense or I needed to figure out a little bit more about. I'll tell you a little bit more about Ogun. Ogun is the god of iron and also war. So some of the things that he's talking about for me, as someone who's admired his work, to know, to hear, because I think there's something different from reading and then hearing someone. To hear that he's already, made these journeys, which some of them I knew of, to hear it across his lips really was an inspiring moment for me. One of the things that made me so stressful, I guess, during that time is that I was at Skowhegan as well, and I had been invited to the Whitney Biennial. I had also just had a reading with my Baba, who tells me that I need to do work with Shango out of nowhere. And then also the challenge is that in some way I need to figure out how to bring my faith into the work explicitly. So I start to dress my studio with some objects. One of the things that I do and have done for many, many years now is I put something on the wall that bothers me, like to the point of like sensory, something that like disturbs me, to kind of like create a like energy field. That object was it's this object that has like is used to kind of remove the seeds from cotton. You sit it on your lap and it removes the seeds from cotton. I got it from an antique shop during one of the many trips that I took in Maine.
They're not masks, although some people like to refer to them that way. Maybe the psychological implications in them might feel that way to some people, but they are intended to be as psychologically intense as possible, however you can make that happen, or I could attempt to make that happen. This one, for instance, is called Mojo for 1404. When I said the work is personal, 1404 was the address of my family's house in Houston. It was the number. And it was my grandmother's house for 50 years, which is where I grew up. Next slide. In these objects, there's something that went on in much of traditional African sculpture that I was interested in, but wasn't sure how to do or how to make relevant specifically to my life as I was living it, or am living it. But that work often had to do with the modification of fate. You know, various cultures have things like crosses or stars and crescents, or things that mean things to people. Rabbit's foots, horseshoes, ways of modifying fate. I thought that aspects of that might work in my work, and so you'll see literally crosses and horseshoes and stuff. Whether I have that particular faith or not is not the point. Next slide.
One of the things that he says here, the modification of fate, really struck me. Another thing he says is the African sculpture make relevant to the contemporary. At that moment, my struggle was this overwhelming understanding that I need to collapse a very private part of myself. When I say collapse, bring it into something that's a very public part of myself. Part of the thing that I had to work through, when my Baba tells me I have to work with Shango, Shango is an Orisha. Shango has the head of all artists. If you make art, you need to, give something up to him. Because Shango possesses a particular kind of notion or energy that's tied to a certain bravery and a worldliness that can go too far, as opposed to Ogun, my Orisha, is more of a worker, blacksmith, endless working in the forest type kind of energy, a behind the scenes kind of energy. So basically, the reading in between, which you have to become very gifted at when you get these kind of readings, is that basically at that moment, one of the things I can share was that I was very much considering leaving the art world in general. I was like, I had had enough with the galas and the people, and I was just like, this is not for me. And one of the things that was the struggle was like just understanding how to like be in those spaces. The gift or the math of saying to work with Shango is to figure out how to be courageous, how to figure out how to be in the world, figure out how to kind of represent yourself in various different spaces.
I guess the reason I had sort of made the switch, and for me it was a switch, was that the reason I guess I began to take sculpture so seriously was that there was something that I wanted to do which you couldn't do in painting. Not that sculpture couldn't be painted, but simply that what was attracting me, it was coming out sculptural, and I'd better, or felt the need to push it. But around 1967 and 8, enough of the idea of color, and I think because of I developed a simpler approach to the surface of form at that point that I felt the possibility or the need for it and started to. And for instance, this combination, next slide, of stainless and painted steel. And the idea of the possibility of reflecting the color into the stainless, which under certain light was striking and other lights not, but was a set of possibilities. This is the same piece that you just saw before. Another slide.
Another lesson or word that I needed was how to change direction. I think that if you're familiar with my work, I don't really do a lot of the same things unless they're like part of a series. At this moment, I completely saw it as an affirmation coming from someone who not only is talking about a switch from a form that I did not even know that he did at that time. I didn't know that he was a painter. I'd only known the sculpture. But to know that that existed was very affirming. There's another note that stuck out for me, which was the surface of form, the need for it. That's going to come back around.
The title of that piece was called Homage to My Father in the Spirit. If you haven't guessed it by now, I'm fairly sentimental and, maybe to the point of melodrama, but I intend to keep it that way. I figured nobody else is going to write about my family, so, I'm going to do it. This one's dedicated to my grandmother, or my father's mother. It's called Coco. It was made in 1970. It's symmetrical and it rocks. The rocking is a little bit asymmetrical or syncopated because the chains have a gravity drag. And next slide.
In the corner, I visit this after I get out of the residency.
But the small pieces on the wall are a group of the lynch fragments. Those are dated from 1978 and 79 because in having a survey of some earlier work in 1978, I showed a group of the older pieces, and in looking at them, I thought there were some ideas in them which I hadn't gotten to yet, and the intensity in that direction was still there. So I thought I'd get involved again. So, I'm going back and forth. Next slide. Well, that's those pieces. They're meant to hang at eye level, be approximately 2.5 feet apart from each other, and should be intense enough to confront you strongly.
Also have the religious association horseshoe.
They have those aspects. Whether the horseshoes are there or not, I'm not. When I said religious, I don't mean, that one is and one isn't, if it has or doesn't have. But I was talking about the kind of intensity which is implied by a religious interest in something. In other words, they are not there to say that is a religion I believe in. Although obviously, if I've been living as a sculptor for 20 years, I certainly believe in it. As a process or as a way of life, I believe in art or the creative idea, of living that way. But, well, that goes off into a whole bunch of stuff, Next slide. Yeah. Art's hard enough, religion's impossible. This is a combination of the ideas. In fact, the title of this one was Juju, or the Multiplication of Experience. And of course, it's a combination of earlier ideas, but the environment and the object. Next slide. you don't have to think about who your father was, your mother was, your grandfather was. Although actually, evidently, I do, because I keep naming things after them. But that's the family, that's the heritage, and whatever our experience is a part of it. You know, in other words, an African living on the continent, you know, which great-great-great-grandfather was, and then brought here, and the family continued and went through its experiences here, and we don't speak that language, but then if he'd moved 50 miles away from wherever he lived there, he would have spoken a different language too. Because, for instance, in Nigeria, there are 250 languages, not dialects, languages. So the idea of change and being different from what was is a part and parcel of human culture, even though you are a continuance of, you know, a particular group of people. So whatever you are at this point is a continuance of it. But if your environment is very different, it will be harder for people to classify it explicitly unless they just take it on face value. You know, just say, well, he is, so he is.
Agricole is a rum from the French Caribbean.
I had a conversation in Cuba in January with a Cuban painter that I mentioned earlier, Wilfredo Lam, who's about 80, and whose father was Chinese and his mother was Afro-Cuban. He's a Cuban. And Wilfredo, in saying at this get-together to the people there, that with tears in his face, he was serious. It was a beautiful day, but he said that what he had wanted to do most of all was to do something that made the world in a contemporary way understand or see the African aspect as a contemporary thing. And while they had been introduced in the Western world by Picasso and others, it wasn't the same as it was when it came from him who was, you know, in line. And so he, you know, he, in other words, that attempt at that kind of communication with aspects was important to him. For me, was one of my heroes for some time. So, you know.
So after listening to this amazing lecture, and there's another one that he does in '92, I believe. He comes back. But after listening to this over and over, having my notes, pulling out all the books that I brought, books that I'm buying in real time, things that I'm looking at the library, I call some core, make an edit to start to think about what I can do and actually how to get to work. And then I kind of figure it out after I come across going through the archive of African arts, this journal. I read about this Agbini Shango shrine in Ibadan. This is from December of 1998. You may have read the press that I did around this work, but this is where it starts. This article, I get a hold of the PDF and then I get the book, the journal. And what it basically is giving a breakdown of the shrine and basically the pieces that were taken from the shrine. The shrine is in Ibadan. That's a bit of a drive from Lagos. The objects that were taken are now at DIA, Detroit, oddly. And they have these, you know, distinct pictures of what these are. But what this does is it kind of puts a seed in my head, amongst many other things, around what people are talking heavily about now is repatriation. So what it puts me in this place of in thinking about specifically Melvin's work, which I'm going to show you explicitly, is how he is able to wield and do a deep study of this material, but working with actual tools that you can see, you can kind of make out what these objects are. From that kind of spiral, I decide that I'm going to make Shango's tools. So what I start with is an axe. I then ask permission to cut down a tree. This part is going to go fast because I have to get to the good stuff. I asked for permission to cut down a tree, which was quite a little bit of an ordeal. It had to be an area where they were going to build something. And it had to be a tree that I could actually cut down because it's actually really hard to do this, I realized. I cut down the tree. It had to be a very particular wood. Shango's wood is cedar. Cut down a tree, I take a piece of the stump out of the forest. I dress it at some point in my reading as well. Before I go, they tell me I need to carry around a red towel. If anybody here is from Skowhegan, when I was there, they will tell you, Tiona was walking around with with an axe and a red towel in the woods. And I am going to show you the culmination of what that came to be. I came out of the woods, literally, and went right into the Whitney Biennial. At this point, I'm 6 years old. 6 is Shango's number. So I'm going to talk over this a little bit while it plays. To make the work, I basically come out of the woods, and then I go through a whole process of chopping up this cedar. I have to dry it, transport it back to Philly. At some point, I go to another residency, like a psycho, where I start to work on the other parts of the project, the tools, the leather harness for the horse, the bridle for the horse. I go to upstate New York and meet a horse. Shango's known for having a horse. I go back to Cuba. I bring the tools and work on them at the Malecon. I go visit my Orisha family, and I have the head of the family, who's a child of Oshun, sing an original song for Oshun to my tools. I offer a blessing through sacrifice to the tools to activate them, to put them back in motion and make them live again. My Baba's there, and then I continue to work on the tools. When they're finished, I take them to Lagos for 72 hours. I go, I find a driver that will drive me to Ibadan and take me to this shrine. There is no map. We have to find it. I find the shrine. I have a photocopy of this article, and I show it to the people. One of the people working at the shrine is the grandson of the person who's in the article. I'm almost attacked because I'm visibly queer, but I tell the driver to tell them that I'm here to pray, and they all back off. I bring the work back to the States, you know, literally drive up to the Whitney Museum of Art, and I put it in this show. One of the things that motivated me to do this is that I'm aware of Melvin's trajectory and how he's moving around, specifically in '81, later that year from the actual lecture. He goes on a trip to Cuba with Ana Mendieta and a group of other artists. So the work shows. I win the Bucksbaum Award, and then I incur a spiritual debt. And the debt is not bad. In my practice, Narisha can ask you to do more. And in this case, I did too good of a job for Shango. My Orisha Ogun said, you need to do some work for me. Everybody needs to know that I'm your child. So give it up, whatever it takes, all these things that you need to do. So I start to do that work by looking through all of the notes coming from this particular lecture from Melvin. Some of the things that I have on here, especially this belt, becomes one of them. This is literally starts this particular relation where I start, or this action where I'm really start to chase Melvin. when he says the part, coming back to the note where he talks about the lynch fragments, and he's talking about how they're at eye level, 2 feet, intense enough to confront you. When he talks about how the lynch fragments function as these like fragments that are material forms, extensions, or fragments of people's lives and the horrors that they've dealt with, specifically Black folks, from the Delta, the area that my family is also from. I started to think heavily about that. I started to think a lot about how his work, specifically some of the fragments as well as other of his works where he dedicates to peers of his, people he admires, one of these being this piece that that gives as a dedication to Ana Mendieta, how they actually work by looking at a deep study of how they function, but literally how they work as this kind of material, like poetic form. I have 2 bodies of work that are distinctly that I'm going to show you tonight that are very much me trying to figure out how to make my own lynch fragment with a consideration of my intersubjectivity as a Black queer woman from the South who's like living in a different kind of like time, but also deeply, deeply tied to very much some of the legacies that Melvin is tied to. One of the things I also want to disclose, as specifically talking about this work, this is a show that happens in 2019, that fall, same year as the Whitney Biennial. This work, or this body of work, was shaped based off of my diagnosis of having ASD. When I went to Skowhegan, what I was struggling with in terms of the articulation, I have really great language for it now. I was actually in a deep nonverbal state. So one of the things that happens in between that time is that I go and I get evaluated, which is its own ordeal. I've spoken on it before. And this show kind of serves as this particular kind of coming out because I talk explicitly about that. And this is all through some of the encouragement of thinking more about the biographical aspect and how to like work that into these deep material analysis. I'm not a welder. I've told people jokingly, as much as I love Melvin, I'm not gonna do that. I'm a little afraid of fire and gas and all that. But I really took to his deep, deep, deep study of material in the way and wanted to apply that to leather to disrupt the idea of it having to always be something that was hyper-figurative, especially coming out of the Brad Johnson work. Wanting to figure out how can I enter into an analysis that could hold all the things that I deal with. The work that I deal with is work that touches on SM and kink, it touches on queerness, it touches on abject engagements or abjection as a whole. Hold on, let me take the safety off. The presentation that I'm showing here, the things that I want to show you are focusing on these objects that are referencing Alvin Bobtrop, which are my belts. Alvin Bobtrop's a photographer that visited the piers, frequented the piers, and was known to kind of engage in a very hyper voyeuristic kind of experience of looking at participants, taking pictures of them at a great distance. A lot of his pictures are taken from a high up point of view or vantage point. I became fascinated by a particular lore that was actually printed where people said that he would use a makeshift harness to secure himself safely from the rafters so that he wouldn't fall while he was engaging in these voyeuristic kind of acts. While I was at Skowhegan, I got my first belt. I was interested in the idea of suspension. Thinking about how to approach this idea that's almost a counter to the notion of lynching, which is non-consensual, but people who like the idea of being suspended, entering into a consensual engagement, entering into something that's more erotic. And I basically tried to collapse that into this object. This is what these belts look like. I get them, I clean them, I scrub them, I repair them. pull the sweat out of them, shine them, dye them, and then I put them on the wall upside down. They each start with AB and then end with the serial number that denotes the object. Serial numbers are crucial to the belts because that's how they stay in code. The belts that I use are all retired because they're all fully leather. Materials that they use now are a little bit stronger because they're supporting the people basically who scale the side of the buildings, the telephone poles, and things of that nature. Play Me Home. Melvin Edwards, Arkansas, Louisiana, Texas, Oklahoma, 2016. Welded steel and barbed wire. This is probably one of my most favorite works that I've never seen in real life. One thing that I really took to in understanding this work specifically is the beautiful poetics of this work as talking about taking the lynch fragments as they exist already, but tying them together with this barbed wire as this gesture of thinking about how they're also connected. These places are places where his family is from. These places are places where my family is from. I was born in Arkansas. My family is rooted in Louisiana, Texas by migration. Oklahoma is a little edging it. Probably got some McCloddens there. I haven't really checked. But it serves as a particular kind of study for me, amongst other artists, but I would say the physical apparatus of this tie, especially with the barbed wire, the roughness of what that barbed wire means in terms of like not traversing it or something that can cause harm, but forcing something to be together felt distinctly like my family. In 2021, I presented a work that had been started in 2013, but kind of abandoned because of its difficulty. My familial difficulty, to be honest. And I completed it in a very abstract form by literally going and presenting myself to the lands that my family were from in the Delta. It's called Play Me Home.
Farm home administrating office. They ain't give them nothing, they sold it. They might have gave them the mule.
It must be another program. I want to Google it.
But,
I always heard of 40 acres and mules, just never really possible.
Yeah, it was most of these, like I said, most of these places was 40 acres. Some, like a couple of these places on the other road, they was some of them.
If you remember, in one of the things that Melvin says is he says nobody's going to write about my family, so I have to do it.
You know, to keep the places, but a lot of them couldn't keep them. They just really what it was. Government wasn't giving them the funds that they really needed. You know, and when they did give them a little something, it was too late. You know, people had their crops. White folk crops was yay high, and when black folks got their money. That little money they let them have, shit.
This is almost the same thing. I googled this. Said, did anyone get 40 acres and a mule? It said portraits by Matthew Brady. We have been taught in school that the source of the policy of 40 acres and a mule was under General William T. Sherman's Special Field Order number 15, issued on January 16, 1865. That account is half right. Sherman prescribed the 40 acres in that order, but not the mule. So let's see. I guess you really have to read up on this.
Yeah, they didn't. Like I said, they didn't give them nothing.
This was back in 1865.
They bought these places.
Mm-hmm.
You know?
Yeah. So now.
But a lot of people, like I said, they just couldn't. And then you had to borrow your money from the same fund. The FHA, that's where you make your loans out, and then you have to pay them the loan plus the note on your property. Mm-hmm. And if you got a tractor, See, it was so hard for the black back then. That's why all these people had to move and leave. You couldn't buy a tractor. They wouldn't let a black man buy a tractor by himself. You know, he had to buy with one of his other friends, his neighbor or something like that. And then when it's time for him to use the tractor and you using it, it causes conflicts between them, and they kept black folks with conflict like that. And if you raised a hog or chicken, they wanted to know how many eggs the chicken lay, how many greens you raise in your garden, so they know how to cut your money.
Wow.
You don't need this much money if you got all them greens and chicken. And that's the way they did the black folks back then. But some of them made it. And I think my daddy, he never had to buy a tractor with nobody else.
I don't even know why I'm getting emotional, but these lectures suck a little bit because you have to look at things sometimes that you've done. I got the opportunity to present this work to my family at their request for my family reunion this year. That's what makes me emotional about it. They're like, when we look up our name, we see you. And they're like, we want to see this work. There's an elder that I filmed that passed away shortly after this was done. But the flower is called the 4 o'clock flower, and it thrives in neglect. It's a seed, you don't have to water it. It'll take the moisture from the air. It blooms at night, dies by the morning. You find it along railroads in the Delta, in rough areas along the Mississippi. Achaba de Ogun, 2022. So much work. Mel Edwards, Ile Ogun, 2002. Ogun has tools, 7. Hammer. People make the figuration of like a ladder sometimes. Got a hammer, shovel, range of knives, razor blades, my addition, axes, any tool with metal, any tool that extends the human form. As a child of Ogun, especially with the Ogun that I have that wants a particular kind of like war, I've dedicated my left arm to all the tools that accentuate human strength. 2022 is part of my spiritual debt. I make an Achaba de Ogun. This is about as close as I can get to Melvin. These smaller forms. Mine's a Pullman form. Small pieces of metal, and then also many that are made out of nails. As much as it's an art object, it actually is alive, so it's not something that is to be handled by anyone else but me. The spark for this starts in Skowhegan. If I go back to that picture of me in the studio, what I started to do is a deep investigation of Ogun, blacksmiths, how they show up in media and culture. I start with going back to my memory of La Jetée, Chris Marker's film. I had the book that I had from that time at the residency. I worked through this particular part of this film where this Achaba presents itself on the lead actor, the man. And it's kind of referenced as something that is from a primitive time that no longer exists. When it's presented, the man says the woman or the character says that the man invents an explanation. And so I start to get very angry, and I was like, I have a beef with Chris Marker now, So I'm like, I'm gonna do a project. Tell him what this is. Like, what are you doing? You're playing with my things. What I do is I do a deep study on everybody in the film. And I land on Davos Hanek, who's the lead, And around this time as well, I'm invited to participate in parkours in Basel. But in my study of Davos, who's rocking this achaba throughout the entire film, but doesn't want to call it what it is, find out that he ends up, after this film, engaging in still work. He starts to produce several commissioned artworks throughout Paris and France that still stand to this day. So in my studio, I forge my own with my little anvil, make my achaba, and then I actually do have it taken to Basel for a very specific kind of project. But along the way, I actually have it also included in another project that is presented in 2022, a work that's commissioned by the curator Olga Viso for her Juan Francisco Elso project, where she approaches me to do something because she knows that I'm a child of Ogun. I can tell you what happened when I felt it the first time. But first I have to tell you about my relationship to steel. There's a process that's called annealing, or to anneal steel or iron. And basically, it's the process of applying immense heat and almost like inflaming the metal. And that process of like inflaming fortifies the metal and prevents it from becoming brittle. So inherently it makes it stronger. The feeling is like receding into yourself just slightly, enough where you hang on the inside and then the outside can move on its own. I could hear things, but I couldn't respond to them. I felt 10 feet tall. When I came to, there was about 5 men on me, holding me down, and I could see my Baba laughing and saying that they were saying that I was too strong, I was too strong. In my dreams, sometimes it happens. I dream of war. My body overheats. It inflames. Each time I get stronger, I wake up with the feeling of muscles that I didn't even know I had. My lovers can barely sleep next to me at night. My body, a state of sleep paralysis. I wake up. The ache returns. This work traveled and was shown in this space. And basically, in trying to please and flatter Ogun, create an entire chainmail body replica of myself, and place the achaba to travel with the work along the way. Each stop, I traveled to present the achaba and take it at the end of the show. 2022 is when the first time I ever met Melvin Edwards. I didn't know what to say. And Stuart is the person who, Stuart Comer, is the person who kind of like, made it happen, took this picture. And it was a lovely, lovely moment. I had the achaba in my pocket. I was too nervous to take it out and be like, look what I did. But it was a gorgeous, gorgeous moment for me, very affirming on the journey of trying to like, kind of execute the notes of this man and what he's left. I did tell him that I listened to his lecture. And I think he said that old thing or something like that. Next, I want to talk about a mercy in relationship to trying to figure out how to deal with still, especially in relationship to trying to figure out how to get metal on the wall. There's this quote I'm going to read out because I think it's just beautiful from this Sculpture magazine text. Continuity is a big idea in Edwards' work. Speaking with curator and critic Brooke Hammond Rappaport about the after effects of lynching, Edwards made a point of destructive continuity. Quote, "It's the thing people do with power all the time. You kill someone as an example. The person that you kill is out of his misery as soon as you kill him. But the people around who are living are the ones who suffer from that event." Edwards has also made a point of constructive continuity. "I've tried to use and develop forms of power, vitality, and creative continuity. The after effects of lynching do not, and in all likelihood will never end. Destructive behavior will not end. For someone who has consistently expressed his determination through art to improve the world, it was imperative to make sculpture in which the force of creation would be greater than that of destruction." In one of his most remarkable statements, Edwards said, "The title of this series is, in a sense, a metaphor for the whole struggle, and the point that I took, it had a lot to do with the fact that the level of struggle necessary to make things just had to be up to the level that it was unjust. My effort in sculpture had to be as intense as injustice, in the reverse. Edwards' mission and will are clear here, as if his belief in art, and in particular in sculpture." And this is from Sculpture magazine, conversation with Michael Brinson on the occasion of his 2024 Lifetime Achievement in Contemporary Sculpture Award. This is Melvin Edwards' Ogun again. One of the many pieces where he references Ogun that I've always followed, one of the things that I've always sought out, especially if I'm at our fair, because that's oddly the places where I will see a lot of these, tucked in a corner somewhere. I seek them out. I spend so much time looking at them, trying to make sense of them, but specifically the ones that recall and relate to my Arisha. 2023, I have a solo presentation at the Kunsthalle Basel. It's the first presentation of my head gates. These head gates are these objects that are used in the cattle industry. They're 300 pounds each. They all have difference. The only slight difference is the bend in the middle, if it exists. My fascination with them is that they evoke a certain kind of structuralism, and they dare kind of participate in this idea of like a humane or sadistic form of killing as a part of the question of their function. They also function as a psychological object, much like what Melvin has talked about, which is like something that is imprinted in many of my notebooks about trying to create something that confronts you on the wall. The goal is to seduce the viewer to figure out who do they, or where do they lie. Do you want to pull the handle? Or do you think about what happens when it's actually pulled? The first presentation of these works at Kunsthalle Basel were all American head gates sourced from farms across the country. The second presentation was a larger presentation in London that were UK and Europe sourced, some new, some used head gates from all over the countries. I did this because the British made me mad, you know, with this whole Trump shit. Everybody's like, oh my God, how, I'm not gonna do a fake British accent, but imagine. oh my God, it must be terrible. Do you think about moving? I'm like, here? Where you have a king? I'm like, we're made in your image. But this was a prompt for me where I split and I was like, I'm not gonna bring American head gates here. I'm gonna find the ones that exist on the countryside, UK and Europe. And one of the more interesting aspects of these head gates, of course, is that they're the most brutal structures that exist. They don't have the same kind of laws that stop you from, you know, not breaking an animal's neck that we have in the country. This is me under iron. I pray in Paris. I go to the Eiffel Tower. It does something to my head that I like. So I just was in Paris. I was in a show that opened about a couple of weeks ago at Palais de Tokyo, where Melvin also opened his solo presentation, his first solo presentation, I think, in Paris at this level. It's like very like retrospective survey-ish. I actually saw that show when it was in Bern, Switzerland, because I love him so much that I travel to go see the work if I can. And so I got to see him again, and I got to ask him a question that I've been wanting to ask that I was too afraid to ask in 2022 because I was just like kind of starstruck. I asked him about Ogun, and I asked him about what he's learned from Ogun and I guess how that has shown up in his work. And he gave me a very, very Melvin answer that I'll keep, or who, if people were there, they probably remember it. But yeah, it's, I think, I don't even know what to say about it, but one of the things that has been so amazing, I think, in having this kind of relation to somebody who is like still so active, but also has created so much work, is having the ability to get to a point where you're exhibiting anywhere in the vicinity of that person, especially in thinking about the ways that that kind of art has functioned in the larger cultural history of this like art industry or art world that we're in. You know, so it makes me very proud to sit and share for the first time in depth. My friends who are in here know about my Melvin Edwards thing. How much I relate or how much I take or even steal from him. To show how it can exist, this kind of conversation intergenerationally, that is not active. I do not have his number. You know, it's not something that's like, you know, hey Mel, I would never call him that. But it is something that is the most important, one of the most important kind of engagements or facets in my life. It's been a pleasure to be able to learn through him as he's working through the actual material of the Risha that I have. It's taught me so much about the kinds of materials that I need to work with in the deep study that I need to present. And so I'm closing this talk, 70 slides, with Mel Edwards, Gate of Ogun, 1983. This had a stint at the White House at one point, oddly, but it's my next journey to go see this work. Thank you.
At the installation at White Cube, I noticed one of the gates was white. Could you talk about that decision?
Yeah, they're twins. I was just thinking about it in a basic sense of the softness. The paint that I use is very matte, so when you get up on them, they're kind of velvety. And the gate, thinking about it almost like a surrender, like something that should be safe. In livestock culture, you don't paint things white. They're like red, you know, they're black, they're blue, they're like kind of these very particular colors. You don't paint them white because you would like kind of run into them, the animal could run into them. They're not, you know, really reading that as a color. And it also is too soft. Yeah, so I wanted something that was like a little soft. Yeah.
Question. I know a little bit of the answer because we discussed this yesterday, but I'm still curious if you could articulate for us Melvin's relationship to Ogun.
Yeah. So, Melvin, the biggest and the clearest, the question, the way he answered my question in Paris was so perfect because he's like, Ogun is still. So that is my relationship to, Ogun. In the lecture, I love that he just says, it's kind of matter of fact, it's very casual. He's like, doesn't have to be this kind of thing, but he does at least talk about this idea of a modification of fate, which is a very, very distinct kind of language around faith or kind of bending spirit in a certain way. So as he comes from a lineage of blacksmiths. He has done the genealogical work from his sharing in that lecture, that he knows that there was a great-great-great-grandfather that was sold in New York that is the ancestor of his mom. So he comes from a lineage of blacksmiths. And his also access to that culture, I think, is a very specific culture that is related to the god as well. They still uphold some of those things. But I love his explicit tie of to name something, Ile Ogun, Gate of Ogun. It's kind of giving an honor to the deity. Yeah, it's much like, I could have done an equal, not for Dia, but I could have done another talk where I just talked about a lot of the artists that give a particular kind of praise to Oshun or Yemiya. Not Melvin Edwards, Carrie James Marshall, when I was at London, I got a private tour with Mark Godfrey of the Royal Academy show, and I was pointing out to him all the different orishas that were featured within the work. So it's I think Melvin's of a more, I would consider him, and I've said this privately mostly, is that I think he's the greatest flatterer in a contemporary form of Ogun, in terms of the purity of it. But there's also Richard Hunt, many other artists, some of the artists that he mentions in the, I encourage you, if you can get access to this lecture, to listen to the whole thing. He talks about a lot of different artists that I don't think people are used to hearing their names, that do fantastic work. They work in big forms and metal and things like that. But the deep study and the awareness of the metal and the objects that are in there, that is what it was for me. Yeah, or what it is for me.
I have two questions. So one, when you were showing the gates, it made me think of Temple Grandin. Do you know?
Yes, that's a direct reference. Yes.
And she, she has autism,
yep.
And so her family had a ranch in Arizona, I think, or New Mexico, and she would go spend summers out there.
Yeah.
And she wanted to experience what the cows were
doing.
She
built her own hug machine.
And she went into the gate, and it was the first time when she didn't have any, she could be normal. It actually did something where it stabilized her for a few hours. And so when she started working with autistic children, she developed what she called the hugging machine. Yeah, the hugging machine. So it's like another aspect of the gate seemed so brutal, in the exhibit. But then at the same time, sometimes it works as a hugging machine. To comfort.
I have the more, I don't know if I can get to it, but the, she was part of the core of, hold on, let me take the safety off. I write about it in the artist statement, but also that for a mercy is that cattle chute that's on, this is a gallery that's on the 4th floor, and this is in New York. This is a company gallery at the old location. So most people in New York didn't know what the hell this was, but this was kind of my coming out as a person living with autism spectrum disorder, because not only in growing up and seeing these objects, Temple Grandin is a big part of my life. I just recently met her, took a picture of her and with her. And I reference her writing, especially her essay around humane and sadistic killing, the difference. The whole core interest in this object was the audacity of the object to provide pressure and create a kind of like false sense of security for an animal that has not felt that since they maybe came out of the canal of their mother. And that the fact that that pressure and that caress or that hug was used as a distraction to ultimately kill. So that to feel this kind of sense of surrender or a kind of a comfort, only to be, hurt, even if it's inoculating branding, which is why these devices are used. The head gates are even more brutal, which is why I kind of gone back through them. There's like going back to them. The note that Melvin has around having a series, especially with the lynch fragments, saying that there's still something there that I haven't worked through. That's what I was doing there. It's like, I've done the cattle shoot. I told people I'm not doing it. They got a little too excited about it. I was like, that's it. But the head gates were endless possibilities, even though they're limited to a certain amount, because they focus solely on the head and the neck. And they are kind of like bizarrely dishonest objects, in the sense that that bend or the slight bend is supposed to have a protection, but it's like, there's no protection. The title, A Mercy, comes from Toni Morrison's novel, A Mercy. There's in the last chapter, there's a line that is repeated where she says there is no protection, but there is difference. In relationship to a mother relating to her daughter that's engaging in this like transatlantic slave trade, trying to protect her from a violence, to try to steer her towards a lesser violence. So with these objects, they kind of query or put forth hopefully a query of what is the notion of a lesser violence. Like, killing is killing. The quote I read from Melvin, this violence, the after effect of lynching. Lynching is lynching. These things that happen that create this horror also has an effect for the people who survive it, which is what Temple focuses on. When she's writing about humane and sadistic killing, she's not talking solely about the animal. She's talking about how it affects the worker and how it changes them physically, how it changes them in society, and that is what I'm interested in. Yeah.
Thank you, Tiona. Thank you so much.